Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at another short Latin story, and this one is called The Pig's Revenge. Now, like all the other ones I've been doing in this series, they're coming from H.J. Hardy's Latin Reader for the lower forms in schools. So if you've watched any of these videos, you've heard me say before that what Hardy's calling the lower forms, and again, it's a little vague what he meant by that, I don't necessarily think this would be great for a beginner Latin student. In fact, I know it wouldn't be, but where I would peg it if you're trying to think of where it falls in sort of a traditional, middle school, high school Latin curriculum is probably somewhere in that middle ground, right? So call it Latin 2, maybe 2, 3, somewhere in that range. There are some things you need to understand, subjunctive being one, that would make it trickier for a younger student, but they're a great tool to kind of complement or supplement, maybe is a better word, a Latin curriculum because they're things that you've probably never seen before as a Latin reader or potentially as a Latin teacher, right? Some of them are historical and they come from different sources that Hardy adapted. Some of them are just sort of, made up stories with morals or just fun stories like this one. You can tell by this one, The Pig's Revenge, it's going to be sort of one of those mystical fun type stories. So there's just something different to work on. If you're learning Latin, they give you a chance to really see something that you've never looked at before. Just test your Latin skills in a different way with something fun. Kind of shake it up so that you're not stuck reading the same things over and over again. So that's what I would use it for. Now, before we dive into it, I'll read you the story start to finish, just so you can hear it. Again, not that my pronunciation is anything spectacular, but at least it'll give you a chance, if you don't have anyone to read the story with, to hear the story, right, and practice your listening skills. If you do have someone in class that you can read it with, of course, it's much better if you read the story aloud, right? Work on your speaking, your pronunciation, and then a classmate can read it back to you, can work on your listening. That's always the best way to do it. So I'd highly encourage you to do that. Before you get too far into it again, what I really encourage you to do is learn the vocab. So do a pre-read. I would highly doubt there's any sort of vocab list you'd be able to find for these, just because it's such an old textbook. I don't think anyone really has them. So you might want to do a pre-read, write down all the vocab, study it, make a Quizlet, whatever it is you need to, because it's almost impossible to read through these if you don't know what the words mean, no matter how good you are at Latin, right? You got to have the vocab under control. And then the next thing you want to do is try the read and reread method, right? So read through it once, write down any problem areas you have. When you're done with the read, right, read it all the way through, go back, look at your list of sort of problem areas, right? Vocab is pretty easy. Just pick up a dictionary. You'll be able to find it and figure that out. For the grammar, it might be a little trickier, right? But try to work your way through and try to really figure out what you're looking at. And there's a bunch of resources you could use, that'll help you understand the grammar, or at least a big chunk of the grammar of what you're looking at. Things like Alpheus, right, come to mind. So use whatever you need to, and then go back and read the story again. And the goal is that after you do that a few times, right, 2, 3, 4, however many times you need, you're trying to hit a point where you can read through this story without needing any vocab help, any grammar help, and you're understanding all of it or pretty close to all of it, right? That's the good sign that you're ready to move on. Okay, but these are just fun stories, so have some fun with it. So like I said, before we dive into the translation, I'll read it through to you, then I'll pause the video and we'll go on. So the story goes like this. You have cum praedones ad terrenam terram navem piraticam apulissant, ex harapemutos sues furto abactos in navem impassuerunt. Funibus quibus relegata erat solutis ad navigandum incubuerant. Suarii praesentibus pirati silentium tenebant, quoad e portu illi se eripuissant et e terra abessent tantum spatii quantum vox clamantis audiri posset. Tum demum consueta voce utentes sues retroversum ad se revocabant. Porci ut primum clamorem sublatum audiverunt, statum in unum navis latus collecti eam everterunt, Itaque piratae malefici naufragio mox ad unum perierunt. Sues vero incolumes ad suos enatarunt. Okay, so we'll pause the video there, right? If you want to work on your, sort of listening, again, not that my pronunciation is great, feel free to listen to that a few times, or better off, find a classmate. But if you haven't done what I mentioned before, pause the video, go back and work on your own. I'll move forward the rest of it, assuming that you've already kind of worked through it on your own, and you're using this as sort of a double check. Okay, so we start with this cum. I remember QUUM, right, is the same as CUM, right? It's just an older version of cum. So when. So you're saying when the praedones. Now that word can mean robbers, right? I think it's, or thieves is kind of how you see it in a lot of traditional Latin textbooks, right? If you use like Ecce Romani, for instance, or something like that. But when you're talking about robbers on the ocean, which this very clearly is when you look at the sentence, you translate it as pirates, right? There is a word piratae, which would have worked, but it's the exact same thing, right? Contextually, it means the same thing. So when the the pirates had landed their ship, right, their pirate ship, their apuliscent navem piraticam, right, when they landed their pirate ship on the coast of the Turanian, right, or on the Turanian land, you might say, right. It's really talking about the Turanian Sea, so that the coast of it. So when they landed on that coast, right, the Terra, right, you have sues, which are pigs. Okay, so the impossible, they forced from the pigsty, right? Hara is like the sty where the pigs live. They forced very many pigs, right? Permutos sues, right? And their pigs having been stolen, right? So abactos, these stolen pigs, they kind of stolen by a trick, furto, right? So they forced them onto their boat in Nawim. So they steal a bunch of pigs, is the idea. Pirates get a bunch of pigs. Okay. Then you have the funibus, which are like ropes, right? Or maybe cables, ropes, cables, whatever it is on a boat, right? It's sort of the ropes kind of tying the boat together. And you can see that with quibus relegata erat, right? So it's the ropes by which it was, or it had been bound up, right? It's talking about the ships. So after they solutis funibus, right? After they untied, right? Solutis sometimes is where you get words like dissolved or let loose, right? So untied the ropes by which it was bound, or with which it was bound, right? They settled into ad navigandum, to sail, right? To sail away. When you have ad going with the gerund there, you're talking about expressing purpose, right? So with the purpose of sailing away. So they steal the pigs, they cut the ropes, and they're off and running, right? The pirates stole a bunch of sues, a bunch of pigs. Then you have suari, right? So if sues are pigs, suari are not shepherds. That's not the right word. Swineherds, right? I think is what they call them, which is such a random word. So suari are the people who take care of the sues, the pigs, right? So herds, swineherds, I think you'd call them. Okay, so the swineherds, praesentibus piratis, right? So with the pirates present, they tenebant silentium, they held silence, they remained silence, literally, not science, silence, right? So literally they held on to silence, but you could say they remained silent is kind of one way to do it. Okay, so they don't say anything. Okay, until Eripuissant, right? They had escaped, right? Literally, it means something like they had Elise Eripuissant, right? They had snatched themselves away. So until they had escaped, right? Kind of sailed off a portu, from the port, right? So they don't say anything. They're waiting and waiting for the pigs and the pirates to go away. Okay. And they were away, absent, right? A terra, where they were away from land. Okay, only as far as, right, quantum quantum. So as far as the vox clamantis, the voice of shouting, right, this shouting voice, posset adire, was able to be heard. So in other words, they wait and let them drift away, but still within shouting distance is kind of the idea, right? So they're still able to hear a shouting voice. Then finally, right, consueta voce, using their and it's utentes, right? So using their consueta voce, their sort of accustomed voice, their usual voice, because they are swineherds, right? They called them back, revocaban, right? So they called back their sues, right? Their pigs. They called them back ad se, to them. So they wait for the pigs to be on the boat. They're still within shouting distance, and then the suari, right, the swineherds, call out, and they do a pig call. No clue what that is. I feel like I've heard of that before, but sure, right? So they do some sort of pig call to get the pigs to come back. Okay. Then you go to the next line. You have porci, right? So the pigs, right? So as soon as the pigs, they heard the shout, right? At first they heard that first shout, clamora, right? First shout raised, sublatum. So when they heard that shout raised up, they immediately, right, statum, they immediately, having collected on one side of the ship, right? So in unum latus navus, right, having been collected in one side of the ship, they averteron, right? They overturned it. Eam is referring back to the navus, the ship. So they turned it over. So the idea is they hear, right, the call of the swineherds, right, the pig people, right, the pig owners. They hear their call, they all come running, and since so many pigs are running to one side of the ship turns over, right? Imagine that however you will. Okay, that's sort of their revenge, if that makes sense. And then you end with this last line, the Attaque line, right? So therefore, the wicked pirates, the malefici piratai, right? And there we have piratai, right? Which is another version of Pridone, same idea. So the wicked pirates, they soon perished, right? Perierunt, right? They died. They perished. And so ad unum here means, it looks like it would mean to one. It's a phrase that means to the last, right? To the singular person, meaning they all die, right? So they perished to the last by a shipwreck, a naufragio, right? So they crash because the boat flips over because of all the pigs. Okay, then you have the pigs, though, right? So the sues wero, the pigs, they enatarunt. There we go. They swam back, or swam out, you might say, in columes, unharmed, ad suos, to their owners, right? It literally means to their own, but it means like to their own people, to their own masters, right? The suari. So this is the story of the pigs and the revenge they get. The pirates show up, they steal a bunch of pigs. The pig swine herds, they wait until they, leave port and they're off, but they're still within shouting distance. They call out for the pigs tip over the boat, the pigs swim back safely, all the pirates are dead, right? So it's just another fun story, a different story to give you a chance to, read something completely different. I don't think this is based on any Roman legend, although if you've ever heard of this before, feel free to put it in the comments. But just something fun, something different, give you a little bit of sort of new vocabulary if you've never seen words for pigs or things like that before, swine herds, and just something to kind of give you a chance to get out of your normal curriculum, right? The stuff that you're probably reading, and read something fun, something different. Okay, if you have any questions at all, right, in my translation, they're never perfect, so feel free to ask them. Put them in the comments below. I'd be happy to help. But otherwise, just keep at it, keep practicing, right? Use it as just another chance to improve your Latin by doing something different. Good luck.